In the closing months of 2025, over 90 Chinese naval vessels were active in waters near Taiwan. Military aircraft crossed long-standing unofficial boundaries, while missiles were launched over the island, eventually landing in surrounding seas. Beijing described these actions as routine drills. But military drills are never just routine. They are practice runs, designed to measure coordination, reaction speed, and overall readiness for a potential real-world scenario. Taiwan is far more than a contested territory. It plays a central role in the global technology supply chain and holds a strategic location that could shift the balance of power across the Western Pacific. For decades, China has maintained that Taiwan is part of its territory. Today, that position is reinforced by a massive naval expansion and a long-term approach aimed at isolating, pressuring, and ultimately gaining control over the island. The key question is no longer whether China seeks control over Taiwan. Instead, it is whether it believes any global force would actually prevent it from doing so. The roots of this tension go back to the period following World War II, when China's civil war ended without a clear resolution. Two rival governments emerged, each claiming to represent China. One established itself on Taiwan and continued to exist independently, while the other remained on the mainland, never giving up its goal of reunification. What began as an unresolved civil conflict has now evolved into one of the most critical geopolitical flashpoints in the modern world. Military power, international trade routes, and regional stability in the Pacific are all deeply connected to the future of this single island. So why is Taiwan so important to China? Could it realistically take control by force? What military capabilities are involved? And which nations might step in to support Taiwan if conflict were to occur? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, a former history professor and veteran of both the Army and Marine Corps. Welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. China's long-standing position on Taiwan is closely tied to its One China policy, which gained international recognition during diplomatic efforts in the early 1970s. A key moment came in February 1972, when discussions between the United States and China resulted in a framework that acknowledged Beijing's stance. This framework recognized that people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait believe there is only one China, with Taiwan considered part of it. At the same time, the United States stated that it does not oppose this position and emphasized that the issue should be resolved peacefully by the Chinese themselves. Using this diplomatic foundation, China has steadily expanded its territorial posture, not only regarding Taiwan but across a wider region. Its presence has grown significantly in East Asia, including areas such as the South China Sea, the Sea of Japan, the Indian Ocean, and the broader Western Pacific. Part of this expansion includes the construction of artificial islands, many of which have been developed into military outposts in disputed waters. Alongside this, China has continued to rapidly increase the size and capability of its navy. In recent years, tensions have been especially noticeable in interactions with the Philippines. Reports indicate a rise in direct encounters, including incidents where Chinese Coast Guard vessels use water cannons and aggressive maneuvering, leading to damage to both civilian and military Philippine ships. Philippine officials have also accused Chinese forces, including naval units and aircraft, of engaging in intimidation tactics. These developments have encouraged closer defense cooperation between the Philippines and the United States, including plans to position additional missile systems in the region as a deterrent. Japan has also experienced growing pressure. There have been repeated instances of Chinese ships and aircraft entering areas claimed by Japan, particularly around disputed islands. Japanese authorities have reported cases where local fishing boats were pursued by Chinese vessels. Australia, too, has raised concerns about similar encounters. Surveillance operations have been met with close-range interactions from Chinese aircraft, including situations described as unsafe. In one reported case, defensive countermeasures were deployed near an Australian patrol aircraft during operations over international waters. Although Taiwan remains a central focus, China's broader regional strategy appears to extend well beyond a single objective. It reflects a wider effort to expand influence, strengthen military positioning, and reshape the balance of power across the Indo-Pacific. Strategy is to keep tensions simmering in various regions without crossing the war line, while expanding and normalizing China's presence. These actions are meant to divert global attention away from their primary objective, Taiwan. China's willingness to raise risk in the air and sea incursions to draw other nations' military assets and focus away from Taiwan reduces any rapid response to any invasion should that occur. They do this while claiming the other side provoked the encounter. These methods are high pressure, low signature, and displays China's power and presumed control on the water and in the air without handing rivals a clean Article 5 treaty trigger moment. So far, China has not committed an aggressive act that would invoke the NATO Article 5 Mutual Assistance Protocol, but that is only until someone gets hurt or a ship sinks. Article 5 is tied to attacks in Europe or North America and other defined areas via Article 6. Taiwan technically is outside that scope, so the Taiwan invasion doesn't trigger Article 5 by itself. However, the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty of 1951, Article 4, states that an armed attack would have a military response should that nation be attacked. Likewise, Japan's Article 5 of the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty of 1960 MUSIC is quite clear: an armed attack against either party in the territories under the administration of Japan would mean military action. Article 6 of the treaty gives the U.S. use of facilities and areas in Japan for Japan's security and Far East stability, which is the backbone that makes U.S. operations possible. Key point for China-Taiwan. If a Taiwan conflict expands to strikes on Japan or Japan-administered territory or creates a direct Japan territorial scenario, this treaty is a big one. China's naval buildup is no longer coming soon. It's here. And it's increasingly about power projection, blockade, and sea control, especially Taiwan scenarios rather than just coastal defense. Chinese fleet size and trajectory are reported by the U.S. Navy CRS, reporting citing Department of War Intelligence studies that state China has a battle force of over 370 ships with projections of up to 435 by 2030. That number does include some smaller missile craft categories, such as the Type 022 NATO designation Hubei class Chinese catamaran missile boats. These smaller missile platforms are inexpensive and quick to produce, allowing China to field large numbers in support of amphibious operations in the Taiwan Strait. China only has 3 active naval aircraft carriers, the Ling, Shandong, and Fujian, with a modest complement of about 180 naval fixed-wing strike aircraft. The newest carrier, Fujian, was commissioned in November 2025 and uses electromagnetic catapults, which is a major technological improvement from ski jump ramps, enabling heavier aircraft and potentially higher sortie rates. Fujian's future air wing likely includes J-35 stealth fighters, KJ-600 carrier, AWS J-15 variants, including electronic warfare, aircraft, helicopters, and UAVs. DoD assesses that China claims to produce 6 carriers by 2035 for a total of 9 as it increases their blue water navy capable of projecting power and protecting its interests beyond its immediate coastal waters. Most analysts expect it will take at least another year after commissioning to reach full operational capability because everything is new and still being integrated. China started sea trials of its first Type 076 Sichuan amphibious assault ship in late 2025, designed to launch aircraft and landing craft, and features an EM catapult system similar to Fujian's. China commissioned the first Type 054B frigate bigger than the 054A, with more firepower, able to operate larger helicopters like the Z-20. These joint destroyers as a protective screen for a carrier group and anti-submarine operations. China wants to dominate the South China Sea, a 1.44 million square mile expanse, which is not just a geopolitical flashpoint, but an economic lifeline, channeling over $3 trillion in annual trade through choke points like the Malacca Strait. Remember, every war or conflict has an economic cause. So, how does China plan to secure and control these waters? China has launched 10 submarines between 2021 to 2025, outpacing U.S. launches over the same window. A combination of diesel, electric, and nuclear, China's shipbuilding dominance and capacity to produce large numbers of submarines, surface combatants, auxiliaries, and amphibious ships, MUSIC, including new expanded yards, comes at a high cost. Experts agree that China's submarine and surface fleet has outpaced the U.S. and the rest of the world. But they also agree that the numbers do not support their ambitions. First, Despite their constant industrial espionage and theft of technology, their ships are not capable of managing a major conflict. American submarines are almost impossible to detect, while Chinese subs are noisy by comparison. In addition, China having a large naval fleet does not mean that they are tactically, technically, or even economically capable of using that force effectively against a coalition military power. China's air assets in total number around 39, about 1,583 combat aircraft, plus transports, tankers, special missions, trainers, and 900 plus helicopters. They do not have the China, does not currently have the numbers required to sustain a prolonged conflict against a multi-nation coalition. More importantly, it lacks the long-term economic momentum and logistical depth needed to keep large forces deployed over extended periods, especially if multiple countries intervene. And Chinese leadership is fully aware of these limitations. Because of this, China is likely to rely heavily on blockades, not just against Taiwan, but potentially against other regional actors as well. The goal would be to isolate economies, restrict access, and apply sustained pressure. This could include controlling airspace through layered air coverage while maintaining naval forces in forward positions, allowing for rapid strike capability if needed. However, operating aircraft carriers effectively is not something that can simply be acquired through technology. It requires years of training and operational experience. While China's newest carrier represents a major technological step forward, true carrier group effectiveness depends on repeated practice, flight deck operations, pilot readiness, maintenance cycles, anti-submarine coordination, escort integration, and logistical support. Above all, it depends on experience. Developing that level of coordination in combined naval warfare would likely take many years. Another major challenge lies in combat experience. China has not been involved in a large-scale conflict comparable to modern warfare since the Korean War. That conflict was primarily land and air-based, and it exposed several operational weaknesses at the time. A full-scale amphibious invasion of Taiwan presents an even greater challenge. Transporting and landing large numbers of troops across the Taiwan Strait would require an enormous fleet of specialized ships. To build that capacity, China would likely need to divert resources away from other key programs, such as carriers and submarines. Amphibious warfare is widely considered one of the most complex military operations. Like carrier operations and submarine warfare, it cannot be mastered quickly. It demands years of planning, coordination, and training. China is aware of these difficulties. In April 2022, it conducted large-scale military exercises that effectively surrounded Taiwan. These drills included live-fire exercises and ballistic missile launches, some of which passed over Taiwan and landed in nearby waters, including areas close to Japan. Following these exercises, China appeared to adjust its approach. Rather than staging highly visible crisis-level demonstrations, it shifted toward more consistent, lower-profile operations, regular patrols, and sustained pressure around the Taiwan Strait. By late 2025, more than 90 Chinese vessels were operating the region at various points, maintaining a pattern that resembled blockade rehearsals, without officially declaring one, which would be considered an act of war. China's interest in Taiwan is driven by several key factors. First, control over Taiwan would significantly strengthen China's position across the broader region, from the South China Sea to areas near Japan, enhancing its strategic reach. Second, Taiwan's economic and technological importance cannot be overstated. It is a global leader in semiconductor production, as well as advanced industries, such as aerospace, biomedical research, and emerging technologies. Many countries, including the United States, depend heavily on these supply chains. Gaining control over these industries, however, would require more than influence. It would mean physically occupying and managing Taiwan's economic infrastructure, likely through military force. In response, major global powers have adopted a position that opposes any attempt to change the current situation through force or coercion. This includes countries such as the United States, Japan, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, and Australia. While approaches differ, the overall stance emphasizes deterrence through political and economic pressure. Among these nations, Japan has taken one of the most forward-leaning military positions. Its geographic location and strategic infrastructure make it a critical partner in any regional contingency. The Philippines also plays a key role, particularly as a support and staging area due to its proximity to Taiwan. Cooperation between the United States and the Philippines has expanded significantly, including joint exercises and deployment of advanced systems. This is especially important given the Philippines' location near potential operational zones. Australia and New Zealand have expressed strong support for deterrence efforts, though they have been more cautious about making firm public commitments regarding direct military involvement. Their approach allows flexibility while still aligning with broader strategic goals. The United Kingdom and Canada have been vocal diplomatically and can contribute in various ways, though their direct military role would likely be more limited compared to regional actors. Despite differences in approach, there is broad agreement among these countries on one key principle: the current situation should not be changed through force. At the same time, regional partners are actively improving their readiness, positioning forces, securing access, and strengthening coordination to ensure a rapid response capability if needed. Japan and the Philippines are especially central to this effort. In the event of a major conflict, the United States would likely lead a coordinated response. This could involve rapid air and naval operations, efforts to restrict enemy movement at sea, intelligence and surveillance coordination, cyber operations, and large-scale logistical support to Taiwan. Economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation would also play a significant role. Even the presence of a strong U.S. naval force in the region would act as a major deterrent. One possible scenario involves attacks extending beyond Taiwan itself. Japan could become a target, either directly or as part of a broader strategy to disrupt support systems. This is largely due to its critical role in providing bases, fuel, maintenance, intelligence, and defensive capabilities. Recent changes in Japan's security posture suggest a shift toward higher readiness and a greater willingness to use military force if necessary. Australia would likely contribute in specialized areas such as submarine operations, surveillance, cyber capabilities, and logistical support, particularly in coordination with the United States. While it has avoided firm pre-commitments, its defense cooperation continues to deepen. The United Kingdom would bring strengths in intelligence, cyber operations, naval presence, and targeted support roles, though it would not carry the primary burden of combat operations. Canada's military, while smaller in scale, would still play a role. While Canada's military capabilities are more limited in scale, it could still contribute in meaningful ways. This support would likely include economic measures such as sanctions and export restrictions, along with diplomatic coordination, intelligence sharing, and possibly a modest naval presence or escort operations depending on deployment availability. The European Union, on the other hand, would likely have a minimal direct military role. Its primary contributions would come through economic pressure, intelligence cooperation, and political alignment. Even among strategic analysts, there is little expectation that major European powers would play a decisive combat role in such a scenario. In practical terms, China is not currently positioned to launch a successful large-scale invasion of Taiwan or engage in sustained conflict across the region. Despite the size of its forces on paper, there are still significant gaps in economic strength, operational capability, and real-world experience. Training, coordination, and technical execution remain critical factors that cannot be built overnight. One way to examine this assumption is through timing. If China believed it had a clear and favorable opportunity to take Taiwan with minimal resistance, it likely would have acted already under less unified global conditions. Instead, restraint suggests an awareness of the risks involved. China's potential external support options are also limited. Russia, often seen as a strategic partner, has faced serious economic and military strain in recent years. Its ongoing challenges reduce its ability to provide meaningful assistance. Energy imports remain important for China, but in a conflict scenario, sanctions and trade restrictions could quickly disrupt those supply lines. If a broader coalition response were triggered, economic pressure, blockades, and coordinated sanctions could significantly impact China's ability to sustain long-term military operations. Maintaining momentum in such conditions would be extremely difficult. As a result, China's current strategy appears to rely on consistent presence rather than immediate action. By maintaining military activity and strengthening its regional positioning, it gradually reinforces its claims while avoiding a direct confrontation. Taiwan remains outside of Beijing's control largely because any attempt to seize it by force carries the risk of a much larger conflict. The island's geographic position and its central role in global technology supply chains make it one of the most strategically important locations in the world. China continues to build its capabilities while reinforcing its long-term objectives. Whether those capabilities will eventually be used remains uncertain. Ultimately, the future of Taiwan will depend on a combination of political decisions, military preparedness, and how other nations choose to respond if a critical moment arises. Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you found this content valuable, consider liking the video, sharing it with others, and subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to support future productions, you can also explore options like channel membership or joining on Patreon.